The slap rang out like a gunshot, silencing the laughter at Rose Hill Bloom Park. In an instant, 9-year-old Noah lay trembling in the sand. His dinosaur castle crushed his cheek, burning red. And standing over him, cold, composed, unapologetic, was the woman who said he should have been marked if he wasn't going to act normal in public. The slap cut through the gentle hum of the park like a thunderclap. It was the kind of sound that made the world go still for a split second. The rustling leaves of the hydrangea bushes quieted. The laughter from the playground froze mid-note, and even the breeze seemed to pause. I was just a few feet away, sipping iced coffee and chatting with my friend Darla beneath the vine-covered arbor at Rose Hill Bloom Park when I heard it. The crack of palm against skin. My blood turned cold before my body moved. And then all at once I was running toward the sandbox, toward my son, toward the sound that had shattered our peaceful Saturday morning. Noah had been having such a good day. He was 9 years old with a mind wired differently from most. His diagnoses, autism and sensory processing disorder, meant that peace was hard-won and often fleeting. But that morning, everything had clicked. His medication was balanced, his sleep had been solid, and we had just finished a calm breakfast together before heading to the park. The newly renovated sensory garden had quickly become his sanctuary, especially the sandbox surrounded by blooming hydrangeas and shaded by a pergola of wisteria. The textures, the repetitive motion of scooping and patting the sand, it regulated him, soothed him. He was in his element. I'd packed his favorite dinosaur molds, and he had already created a sprawling, prehistoric kingdom in the corner of the sandbox. Triceratops stegosaurus, a moat filled with blue pebbles he'd carefully arranged to represent water. It was Noah's world as joy. And then came the woman. I saw her just as I reached the edge of the sandbox. Her hand was still raised, fingers, stiff red, blooming across her palm. My son was crumpled on the ground beside his demolished creation, one cheek glaring red, his body rocking, hands clamped over his ears as he wailed. Not a tantrum, not misbehavior, but the high-pitched primal scream of a child in sensory collapse. "What did you do?" I gasped, falling to my knees beside him, wrapping my arms around his small, trembling frame. "Did you just hit my son?" The woman, polished, composed, and utterly unbothered, crossed her arms. "Your son threw sand at my daughter's shoes." She snapped, her tone sharp with condescension. I told him to apologize. He ignored me. Completely disrespectful. Someone had to teach him a lesson. I looked down. The damage was a few grains of sand dusting the edges of pristine white sneakers, nothing more than what anyone would expect from a sandbox. Her daughter, a willowy girl with a pale pink bow in her hair, stood nearby looking mortified and unsure. I glanced back at Noah. His eyes were shut tight, his body rocking faster now. "He's autistic," I said through clenched teeth. "He didn't mean to upset anyone. And even if he wasn't, how dare you lay a hand on my child?" "Well, maybe he should be wearing something to let people know," she huffed. "He looks normal enough. If he's going to act like that in public, people have a right to be warned." I stared at her, stunned into silence. Marked. Like an animal. Like something dangerous. Darla appeared at my side, then her expression dark, her phone in her hand. I recorded everything she said quietly, her voice low and even. From the moment she walked up to him, the woman flinched. "You were filming my daughter. That's illegal." "No," Darla said calmly. "I was filming my godson playing in the sand. But I also happened to catch you slapping a disabled child. So, should we call the police now, or would you like to apologize first?" Her name, I would later learn, was Vivian Calloway, president of the Willowcrest HOA, wife of Russell Calloway, a prominent local attorney, and apparently the self-appointed moral gatekeeper of Rose Hill Bloom Park. In that moment, though, she was just a woman whose entitlement had finally been caught on camera. A crowd was beginning to gather. Some parents moved toward us with concern. Others lingered at a distance, whispering, unsure whether to intervene. One father, who introduced himself as Officer James Cho, off duty from the local precinct, stepped forward and gently crouched next to me and Noah. "I've called it in," he said. "They're sending a unit." Vivian straightened, brushing invisible lint from her blouse. "This is absurd." It was a tap. That boy needed discipline. If you can't control him, that boy I spat cutting her off is my son. And you assaulted him. She rolled her eyes and turned away, pulling out her phone. "Russell, I need you to get down here. Now." "There's been an incident." Some unhinged mother is making a scene and threatening me with the police. A scene? That's what she called my son's trauma. That's what she called my shaking hands, my child's sobs, the mark on his face. A scene. The patrol car arrived within minutes. Officer Chen, calm and composed, listened to every word. He spoke gently to Noah, crouching at eye level. "What happened, buddy?" he asked. Noah, barely audible, managed a few broken words. "She hit me. I didn't mean to. The sand. I didn't mean it." "I believe you," Officer Chen said gently. "And even if you did throw sand, no one gets to hit you. Ever." Vivian tried charm. She tried denial. She tried to lean on her husband's status. But with video evidence and witness testimony, it was clear this wouldn't disappear quietly. Russell Calloway arrived 10 minutes later in a crisp golf shirt and designer sunglasses. He tried everything legal talk settlement offers, veiled threats. "I didn't budge. Your wife assaulted my son," I said evenly. "We're pressing charges. You really want to put your child through court proceedings?" he asked, voice smooth rehearsed. "Don't you dare use my love for my son to shield your wife from the consequences of her actions," I snapped. "Don't you dare." The slap wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. A woman with power and privilege seeing a boy like Noah as less worthy, less human, a nuisance to be disciplined rather than a child to be understood. As Officer Chen read out the charges and filed his report, Vivian's composure cracked. Her lip trembled. Her eyes darted. But the apologies never came. Just more excuses, more dismissal. That night after we finally got home and Noah was asleep, I sat in the dark of our living room, staring at the hydrangeas blooming outside our window. They had always been Noah's favorite, soft, delicate, and calming. I thought about how something so beautiful could still grow from roots tangled in dirt, and I wondered, could we do the same? I didn't know then how far this fight would go. I didn't know that video would go viral, that we'd be swallowed into a whirlwind of headlines and debates. I didn't know how many people would stand with us and how many would try to silence us. All I knew in that moment was that I wasn't backing down. Not for Noah. Not for any child like him. I would make sure the world saw what happened in that park. That it mattered. That his voice, his pain, his truth mattered. Because no child should be struck for being different. And no mother should have to explain to the world why her son deserves to play in peace under the shade of blooming hydrangeas. The red mark on Noah's cheek had barely begun to fade when the video started spreading. Darla uploaded it privately at first to a secure folder for the police report for documentation for lawyers if we needed them. But somehow, maybe from someone in the park, maybe a parent who had seen the commotion and filmed their own angle, the footage leaked. Within 48 hours, it was everywhere. Local Facebook groups, Reddit threads, shared on Twitter with hashtags like Nashe Justice for Noah and Yanon Ableism in Willowcrest. The video was just under 2 minutes long, but it hit like a punch. Vivian Calloway's sharp voice, her daughter's confused expression, my child rocking in the sand, and then the sound clear unmistakable of the slap. Viewers didn't need context. They saw a woman in power strike a child who didn't fight back, and they saw her walk away like she hadn't done a thing wrong. By Monday morning, my inbox was flooded. Messages from strangers, other mothers of autistic children, former HOA residents with horror stories of their own, reporters, lawyers, activists. And then came the backlash. The comments that said I should have kept Noah at home, that children like him didn't belong in normal spaces, that if he couldn't follow basic social cues, he shouldn't be at a public park. I sat in my kitchen reading them in silence while Noah played with kinetic sand at the breakfast table, unaware that the world beyond our windows had turned him into a symbol. I didn't want him to be a symbol. I just wanted him to be a boy. My boy. But I also knew I couldn't let what happened be swept aside. That evening, Officer James Cho returned to our home with a formal update. Charges were being filed. Vivian would be summoned to court for misdemeanor assault on a minor. Because of the documentation of Noah's disability and the clear targeting in her statements, the DA's office was pursuing a hate crime enhancement. I remember staring at the paperwork in Officer Cho's hands and feeling for the first time since that awful morning something like hope. This won't be easy, he warned me gently. They'll try to bury it or spin it, but the video helps a lot. They did try. Russell Calloway, Vivian's husband, made it his mission to end the case before it saw a courtroom. He sent his junior associate to my home with an envelope and a carefully rehearsed message. They were prepared to cover all medical expenses, plus damages, plus a sizable settlement if I agreed to drop all charges and sign a non-disclosure agreement. I didn't even open the envelope. Tell them no, I said. We're not going away quietly. That's when the campaign began. Anonymous letters appeared in my mailbox. Whispered conversations at the grocery store fell silent when I walked past. I caught one of the HOA's former board members muttering something about people playing the disability card for attention. But louder than all that was the support. Local autism organizations reached out. Parents wrote letters to the city. Rose Hill's mayor, a retired pediatrician, called me personally. "We failed your son," she said simply, "and I intend to fix that." The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. The courtroom was packed, neighbors, reporters, quiet strangers who nodded at me in solidarity. Vivian arrived in a muted beige pantsuit and no makeup, a drastic contrast to her usual polished image. Her face was unreadable. Russell stood beside her, stiff and cold. When her name was called, she walked to the front without looking back. And then she shocked everyone. "Guilty," she said, barely louder than a whisper. The courtroom murmured. Her attorney clarified Vivian was accepting a plea deal guilty to assault with the hate crime enhancement dropped. The judge, a tall woman with clear eyes and a sharp voice, accepted the plea, but didn't hold back. "Mrs. Calloway," she said, "you struck a child who could not defend himself, a child with a documented neurological disability. You then blamed him and his mother and everyone else but yourself. This courtroom cannot force remorse, but it can enforce consequences." She sentenced Vivian to 1-year probation, 250 hours of mandatory service at a center for neurodivergent children, completion of a state-certified disability awareness course, full financial responsibility for Noah's trauma therapy, and a strict restraining order 500 feet away from Noah and me at all times. Vivian said nothing. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just nodded once like a business deal had been concluded and walked out of the courtroom. But the verdict did more than assign punishment, it ignited change. The Rose Hill City Council announced a special meeting to review its inclusion and accessibility policies. I was asked to speak. I stood in the same town hall where Vivian once led community fundraisers, and I told them about my son, about what it means to live in a world that sees difference as defiance. I spoke of hydrangeas, how they bloom differently depending on the soil, and how children do too. The council voted unanimously to fund the expansion of inclusive play spaces across the city. I was appointed as a lead advisor on the new sensory garden initiative. And quietly, like petals falling, Vivian's world began to come apart. She was suspended from the HOA board. Local nonprofits removed her from their donor lists. A local magazine that once featured her kitchen renovation pulled her photo from their website. And Russell, he moved out. I heard it first from Darla, who saw the moving van. Then a formal statement arrived from his office they had separated effective immediately. I didn't rejoice in her downfall. I didn't need her to suffer. I just needed her gone from our spaces, from our parks, from my son's future. The days that followed weren't magical. Noah still struggled. He had new fears, sudden touches, loud voices, unfamiliar parks. He began therapy twice a week. At first, he wouldn't even touch sand. But slowly we rebuilt. In one session, his therapist asked him to draw what scared him. He drew a hydrangea bush torn in half. "It used to be safe," he said. But then the angry lady came. His therapist nodded. "Can you draw what might help you feel safe again?" He thought for a long time. Then he drew a dinosaur, a triceratops, standing in front of the bush, strong, protective. That night I cried quietly into my pillow. Not from sadness, but from the weight of how hard my son was fighting to heal, and how deeply I owed it to him to protect that journey. We weren't done. Not yet. The court might have closed its case, but ours was still unfolding, one step, one sandbox, one hydrangea bloom at a time. The last leaf of autumn had just fallen when I opened the message from Russell Calloway. It had been months since the sentencing, since the courtroom echo of Vivian's guilty plea had settled over our lives like a quiet dust. Noah was healing slowly. The nightmares were less frequent now, the sound of a slap no longer a flash trigger in crowded spaces. He still avoided sandboxes, though. He would pass by them at the park, his eyes flicking toward the raked edges and little buckets left behind by other children, but he never stepped in. He preferred the swings now or the shaded hydrangea trail near the back of Rose Hill Bloom Park, where he could count blossoms in quiet peace. When Russell's email came, I read it 3 times before responding. The words were carefully chosen, deliberate in tone, Elena. I understand this may be unexpected. Vivian and I are no longer living together. Our daughter Emery has been attending therapy since the incident. She's been asking questions about what happened, about Noah, about right and wrong. Her therapist suggested a meeting between the 2 children in a safe and structured setting might help them both. I leave the decision entirely to you. I stared at that message for nearly an hour, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew how much weight it carried. I thought back to Noah drawing the triceratops in therapy, its horns facing outward like tiny shields. I thought about the fear that still sat in his spine, and the way he double-checked my hand was close before entering any public space. And I thought about Emery, how her face had looked that day in the park. Confused, frightened, not cruel, not calculating, just a little girl caught in something far too adult. When I told Noah, I let him hold the choice. We talked through it with Dr. Morgan, his therapist, who carefully laid out what a meeting might look like. Safe space, short duration, no pressure. She wants to say sorry, he asked, fiddling with the edges of his hoodie sleeve. Yes, I said. And she remembers the dinosaur castle. She brought you something too, a gift. What kind? A triceratops, I said. She said she chose it because she remembered that's what you were building that day. He was quiet for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Okay, but only if I can leave whenever I want. Absolutely, I promised. We met at a quiet botanical cafe tucked beside the community arboretum, a place filled with soft lighting plant walls and warm cinnamon tea. Russell arrived first, surprisingly subdued, in jeans and a gray sweater, holding Emery's hand gently. She looked smaller than I remembered, maybe because she wasn't wearing the pink bow from that day, or maybe because the weight of everything had worn down her polished world. Noah clung to me at first, watching her from behind my hip. Hi, Emery said, voice tentative but clear. I'm sorry about what my mom did. I told her not to hit you. I told her it was just sand. Noah didn't answer right away. His eyes studied her face, then dropped to the small box in her hands. Can I give this to you? She asked. Noah gave a short nod. She opened the box and held it out. Inside was a hand-painted triceratops, its body, a glossy forest green with golden horns. I painted it with my dad, she said. I remembered you said you liked triceratops. I read a book about them. They were plant eaters, and they protected their herd with their horns. Noah stepped forward, took the figure in both hands, and turned it over slowly. Then he looked up at her and said, This one's good. The legs are strong. It was his way of saying thank you. And Emery understood. They sat together for 10 minutes that felt like something sacred. 2 children sharing silence, and then facts about dinosaurs, and then favorite flowers. Noah liked hydrangeas. Emery liked sunflowers. They follow the sun, she said. Hydrangeas change color depending on the soil, he answered. And somehow that was enough. Afterward in the car, Noah whispered, I think she was sad too. I think so too, I said. But I'm proud of you. You were brave. He clutched the triceratops in one hand all the way home. Spring came early that year, and with it the groundbreaking for the hydrangea healing garden. The city had fast-tracked the project, and I was leading the design. We built it around inclusivity, raised sand tables at different heights, quiet retreat pods with noise, dampening wall signage in picture-based language for nonverbal kids, and of course, hydrangea borders in every shade of blue and purple and pink. At the grand opening, families gathered from all over Willowcrest. Reporters came too, asking for quotes. I waved them off. This wasn't about headlines anymore. It was about creating a space where kids like Noah wouldn't just be allowed, they would be expected. Noah, in a button-down shirt he picked himself, gave a small tour of the garden to a group of children. He pointed out the sensory sand station and explained how the soft corners helped with proprioception. Emery stood beside him, holding her own toy stegosaurus, nodding along. And I stood back, hands in my pockets, tears threatening, but not falling. Because this was what justice looked like. Not just a courtroom and a sentence, but a boy who once curled up in a park, now standing proud in a garden he helped inspire. As for Vivian Calloway, she didn't attend the event, but I heard she'd been seen volunteering at a local resource center for children with developmental disabilities. A quiet shift. Whether it was growth or image rehabilitation, I didn't care. What mattered was that she no longer held the power to shape the places my son walked through. That power now belonged to voices like his, like ours. Noah still has hard days. Crowds are tricky. Unexpected sounds can undo him in an instant. But he no longer hides from the world. He walks with his head higher. And when new kids enter the garden and ask questions about the plants or the sand, or why he hums when he's thinking, he answers honestly. This is how my brain works, he tells them. And they listen, because they've been taught now to listen. I've learned too. About resilience, about advocacy, about how change doesn't come from silence, it grows from moments of truth. From saying no to hush money, from standing firm when the world tries to blame your child for being different, from believing that your child's presence in a park, in a courtroom, in a garden is not a disruption, but a right. 3 years have passed since the day Noah was slapped in the park. 3 years since a hydrangea bush watched a boy crumble under judgment. That bush is still there. We planted a plaque beside it last summer. It reads, "In honor of all children who bloom in their own time, in their own way. May this garden always make space for them." Because even one voice, one child, one mother refusing to look away can make the garden bloom again. There are moments in life when silence is not an option, when standing firm, even in the face of power and intimidation, becomes an act of love, protection, and justice. Elena Barrett's journey reminds us that no matter how small the moment may seem, a slap in a park, a comment from someone in authority, it can ripple into something much larger. Something that shifts a community. Something that teaches the world how to do better. The most important lesson here is this: every child deserves to exist in public spaces without fear of being punished for how they experience the world. Children like Noah, who are neurodivergent, shouldn't be asked to hide, to shrink, or to act normal just to be safe. And parents like Elena shouldn't have to fight this hard just to protect what should be basic dignity, inclusion, and safety. To every parent listening, trust your instincts. Advocate boldly even when the world tries to shame you into silence. Keep documentation. Build community. Know your rights under laws like the ADA. And don't ever accept a payoff in exchange for your child's right to justice. What happened to Noah could happen anywhere to any family, but the difference was his mother said no. She made sure the world saw, and in doing so, she didn't just protect her son, she built a safer future for countless others. To those without children or those unfamiliar with autism or sensory processing differences, let this story challenge your assumptions. What looks like disobedience may be a child overwhelmed by stimuli. What seems like bad parenting may be a family managing layers of invisible struggle. Offer grace before judgment. Offer space before confrontation. A small shift in perspective can change someone's entire day or their entire life. And finally, to our entire audience here at US, Justice Stories, thank you. Thank you for listening with open hearts, for supporting stories that challenge injustice, and for standing with families like Elena and Noah's. Your voice, your awareness, your willingness to care, that's how change happens. Not just in courtrooms, but in parks, in schools, in neighborhoods where inclusion begins. If this story moved you, we ask that you share it. Let it educate someone. Let it open a conversation. Let it be a reminder that justice isn't just something we demand in big dramatic moments. It's something we uphold every day in how we treat each other, how we raise our children, and how we create spaces where everyone belongs. Thank you for watching us, Justice Stories. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, take care of each other and never stop fighting for what's right.